locations inside of Iran.
I'll save the energy targets for last, but ultimately we'll hit energy targets, yeah. But we're going to hit them very hard tonight. We're going to hit them very hard tomorrow night. We're going to hit them very hard the night after. And then next week it gets really bad for them because next week comes the power plants. Next week comes the bridges. We're going to knock out all their power plants. We're going to knock out all their bridges unless they get to the table and negotiate.
Dover Air Force Base, Delaware, July 22nd, 2026. A cargo ramp comes down at the back of a transport aircraft and a carry team moves into position. 6 soldiers to a case. They lift the first one and walk it across the tarmac in step, slowly, in total silence. There are 4 of them, each draped in an American flag. The President of the United States stands and salutes. Beside him, his defense secretary does the same. The official video of this ceremony has no sound at all. That's deliberate, out of respect for the families standing a few feet away. 4 names. A first lieutenant from Ewa Beach, Hawaii, 25 years old. A private from Carrollton, Texas, 19. A sergeant from New York City, 28. And a sergeant from Fayetteville, North Carolina, 30. Trump would call it one of the hardest things a president has to do. 3 of them died at an airbase in Jordan, hit by an Iranian missile and drone attack in the middle of the night. One of those 3 had been listed as missing for days before his death was presumed. The 4th died in northern Iraq during a controlled detonation of a downed Iranian drone. The president met privately with each family before the ceremony. 2 days after standing on that tarmac, the same man sat down with a reporter and said this: "I am considering a massive attack, bigger than ever before. I am close to making a decision. We are all set for it." And 3,000 miles from Dover, at a military hospital in Germany, 150 doctors and nurses were quietly checking in for duty. The gap. Here's the problem with figuring out whether a war is about to get much bigger. Every government on Earth lies about what it intends to do. Threats are cheap, denials are cheaper. A president can say he's considering the largest attack of the war on Thursday and change his mind by Sunday, and nobody outside a handful of rooms will ever know which version was true. So you don't listen to the podium, you watch the paperwork. Because armies cannot bluff with logistics. Moving people and metal across the planet costs money, leaves paper trails, and takes weeks to undo. And in the last 7 days, the United States has made a series of moves that tell you far more than any statement. By the end of this, you'll be able to read a military buildup the way an intelligence analyst does, and you'll know which of these moves are pressure and which single one is the tell that almost never lies. The tell. Start with the medics, because that's the one. 150 additional military medical personnel arrived in recent days at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. That name may not mean much if you haven't served or covered a war. It should. Landstuhl is the largest American military hospital outside the United States, and it is the place wounded Americans go. When a service member is hurt badly in the Middle East, they are stabilized in theater, put on an aircraft, and flown to Landstuhl. It is the first stop between a battlefield and home. For 2 decades, it has been the building where American families' worst phone calls originate. Now think about what it means to surge 150 extra medical staff into that building right now. Medical personnel don't deter anybody. Tehran does not look at a staffing roster in Germany and feel intimidated. Doctors don't drop bombs and don't show up in a satellite photo the other side can be frightened by. Which means this is the one move in the entire buildup that buys the United States no leverage whatsoever. You only make it for one reason. Because you have looked at what you might be about to do, and you have run the numbers on how many young Americans are going to come through those doors. There's a grim precision to it. Militaries plan casualties the way an airline plans seats. Not out of callousness, but because failing to plan them kills people. Somebody in a planning cell looked at a proposed operation, estimated the casualty rate, compared it against the beds and surgeons available, and found a gap. 150 people were the answer to that gap. Every other piece of a buildup can be theater. Ships can be sailed in circles for the cameras. Jets can be photographed on a ramp. The trauma ward is not theater. It's an actuarial table with a roof on it. The iron. So what are they preparing for? For that, look at what else moved. According to the Wall Street Journal, American Special Operations Forces have deployed from bases in the United States into the region over the past week, working intelligence, tracking, and targeting. Fighter squadrons have been repositioned across the Middle East. Cargo flights have been running steadily into the big American installations. Pause on that first item. Special Operations Forces sent forward for intelligence, tracking, and targeting are not there to kick down doors. That job description means finding things, building the target list, confirming what's inside a building before a bomb is assigned to it. You surge that capability when the number of targets you intend to service is about to go up sharply. And then there are the bombers. Per one official, bomber aircraft at bases in the United States and the United Kingdom are on high alert. And this week, a B-1 Lancer flew its first strike mission of the renewed campaign, launching out of Britain, flying thousands of miles, and hitting Iran. Understand why that matters. A B-1 carries an enormous load of precision weapons and cruise missiles. Flying it from Britain means the United States can strike Iran without needing permission from any base near the target. No host government to persuade. No regional partner who can quietly say no this week. It's the difference between a boxer who needs to be standing close and one who can hit you from across the room. Now add the aerial refueling tankers, also moved into the region. Tankers are the least glamorous aircraft in any air force and the most revealing. Every mile deeper you want to strike, the more fuel you need waiting in the air. Surge the tankers and you are not planning to hit the coastline. You are buying reach into the interior of a very large country. Aircraft can be recalled. Special forces can be pulled home. But the next signal is much harder to reverse because it has to go through Congress. The money. The defense secretary has gone to Capitol Hill asking for a supplemental, extra funding, on top of the existing budget to sustain this campaign. And the House has moved a budget framework carrying tens of billions in additional defense and intelligence money, with reporting putting that figure around $73 billion. Here's why that's the least ambiguous signal of all. You do not ask a legislature to finance a war you are about to finish. Budget requests are slow, public, politically expensive, and nearly impossible to walk back quietly. Bombers can turn around in midair. An appropriations request cannot. When a Pentagon starts asking for money to fight longer, the people inside that building have already concluded that longer is coming. The Pentagon, asked directly about the troop movements, declined to discuss them, citing operational security. The White House offered only that the president always has all options at his disposal, which is the polite way of confirming everything without confirming anything. The target. So the machine is being assembled. The question is what it's pointed at. And on that, Trump has been unusually specific. He has told Iran that every time it fires on a vessel transiting the Strait of Hormuz, the United States will destroy one Iranian bridge or one power plant. Not a warship, not a launcher, a bridge, a power plant. That's a target list of a completely different kind. It's the machinery a country runs on. And notice the structure of that threat, because it's clever and brutal. It isn't a warning about some vague red line. It's a published exchange rate. You touch a ship, you lose a piece of your country. It converts every Iranian decision into a bill, payable immediately, in infrastructure. And the escalation runs on autopilot. Washington no longer has to decide whether to respond, only which bridge. And you can already see it happening. Across nearly 2 weeks of consecutive strikes, American aircraft have hit bridges on the roads to Bandar Abbas, underground weapon stores, coastal surveillance, command centers. Explosions have been reported through southern Iran, including on Chesham Island in the mouth of the Gulf. Israeli media report Washington signaled strikes could come within days, potentially against deeply buried nuclear infrastructure, though that rests on a single source and hasn't been confirmed. The pattern is unmistakable regardless. The target set keeps climbing, from ships to shore defenses to the infrastructure of the state itself, which all points one direction, except for one set of facts that points the other way. The counter-signal. Because for everything you've just heard, no attack has been ordered. 2 U.S. officials confirmed to Axios that no call has been made and no new orders given to the military. Trump himself stressed he hasn't reached a final determination and gave no deadline. A retired general reading the same buildup made the case plainly. This is about handing a president more options, not about a decision that's already been taken. And then there's the thing happening behind him, in his own capital. On Thursday, the House of Representatives voted 214 to 208 to direct the president to halt military action against Iran. 4 Republicans crossed over to join Democrats. The Senate blocked the bill from moving, and it would face a veto anyway. In practical terms, symbolic. But read what it signals. A Republican-led House voted to end its own president's war, and 4 members of his own party walked across the aisle to do it. That's not a footnote. That's a pressure gauge. Axios notes flatly that a return to all-out war is highly unpopular in the United States. And that cuts both directions at once, which is what makes this moment so hard to read. A president losing domestic support might be a president looking for an exit, or he might be a president with a closing window, one who calculates that if the blow is coming at all, it has to land now, while he still has the room to order it. On the other side, no sign of a door either. 2 regional sources involved in mediation say Iran's leadership has not accepted the latest proposal on the table. One summarized it about as bleakly as you can. They're trying, but the Iranians are not being helpful. The Convergence. So put it together. And what you're watching is coercive diplomacy in its purest and most dangerous form. Build the weapon in plain sight, loudly, so that you never actually have to use it. That's why Trump's own explanation is worth hearing exactly as he gave it. He said the Iranians want to negotiate, but that they haven't received enough pain yet. That is not the language of a man who wants a war. It's the language of a man who wants a signature and believes pain is the pen. He added that Israel would join in 2 minutes if he asked, but that America doesn't need anybody. His Secretary of State put the exchange rate in blunter terms. After Iran's foreign minister declared a doctrine of an eye for an eye, Rubio's answer was that the president's policy is a head for an eye. A head for an eye. But coercion only works if the other side has a ladder to climb down. And Iran has just kicked its own away. Its Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters warned that if the American threats become real, Iranian forces will not allow even a single drop of oil to be exported, and will strike the region's oil, gas, electricity, and economic infrastructure. Iran's foreign minister added that mindless aggression will only make the price of a deal higher, not lower. So here is where both sides have planted themselves. Washington says the next Iranian move triggers something bigger than anything yet. Tehran says the next American move triggers the destruction of the Gulf's economy. Two governments have each promised that the other's next step unlocks their maximum response. That is precisely how a buildup designed to prevent a war becomes the thing that starts one. The close. Which brings us back to a quiet tarmac in Delaware, and 4 flags, and a president standing at attention while a carry team walked past him in silence. The doctors are already in Germany, the bombers are already fueled, the money is already moving through Congress. So here's the only question worth asking tonight. Is this the largest bluff in modern statecraft, or the last quiet week before the biggest attack of the entire war? Our update continues. Stay tuned.